There is a time for everything under the sun. Each thing has its own time. The famous reading from the book of Ecclesiastes talks about the various contrasts. A time for embracing, a time for ceasing from embracements, a time for peace, a time for war. The way in which we have got used to the privilege of having much time can actually be not so healthy for our spiritual good. The advantages of having death very close to us and its threat over our head are huge with regard to reality, the reality of what actually matters. In war, life can be almost cheap. In peace, it can also be cheap. Today, we are going to put flowers by the new grave of a person who need not have died at 27, leaving 3 children. It would seem that he must have had something which made him dizzy at the wheel, which he needn't have had in his system. Life is too precious to be placed in a tablet. How many lives are thrown away now by the people who actually in the prime of life don't want it anymore? It has become cheap. How many lives now also are going to not be all on the public health system, just a procedure to stop a life? And then in many countries it is interesting to see how people are invited to make their life testament, which actually means their death testament. And an injection takes away many years of grace and merit and propels them into the bosom of the unrelenting beyond. In the year 2010, we went to celebrate the 400 years of the martyrdom of our local Saint Benedictine, St. John Roberts, who was caught during the last Gospel at Holy Mass in secret and was hanged, drawn and quartered for being a priest. But when we were there in places linked with him on the continent where they had carried on the lamp of Catholic faith, we also took advantage of the opportunity to go to a nearby area to quietly, mentally feast our great local poet, one of the greatest of all in Wales, who wrote a cywydd, which is an extremely difficult, long, metrical poem in very strict metre and rhyme, on the way to the front. Yr Arwr, the hero, was the title. And when it came to the Eisteddfod, the usual proclamation would be made, Safed y bardd ar ei draed, let the poet arise. No one got up. He was dead. One of his comrades testifies, Fe gwelais yn syrthio. I saw him fall. And so the chair was draped in black, and ever since he's referred to as the Bardd Cwsg, the poet of sleep. Hedd Wyn, his poetic name. Peace is his. Well, in the Battle of the Somme, we were there. That is, where the remains of it were in the air, in that ear, and we also knew that the local poet here, Francis Ledwidge, was in the same graveyard. All crosses, all the same, but with quite often an inscription of a few words asked by the family. They could request it of the War Office, but quite often also nothing except a private, an infantry soldier, because they could not identify the body. It was so mangled. Many, therefore, are anonymous. It corresponds, however, to the end of a life. But some had added these words. One was simply, "my boy." Another was words to the effect, "I will think of Geraldine as long as I have light." Light would not be given very long in his case, and that Geraldine would have waited a long time for his return. But there are many hidden heroes not feasted, and because of the massacre of life on all sides, one more life would hardly be noticed in its loss. One time there at the front, in one of the battles in that First World War, we know from a Welsh witness that this happened. The commanding officer had been briefing the soldiers regarding mercilessness. They were not to have mercy. Remember, the one before you is your enemy. And one Welsh soldier of 22 had a reaction which he could not conceal and blurted out, "How can he be my enemy when I never saw his face?" And the commanding officer beckoned to him to come out. For insubordination, he was placed against the wheel of a cannon and shot. One more life. I was deeply moved when I heard this and could but write a word back to him for his word, forgotten and unheard. It was a costly word. A word, when never said, is never known. And when a thought moves not the air, the mind hears not its neighbour's thinking. Rarely shown were views of thought to eyes of humankind, e'en though the souls of some saw more than sight. But this small word here spoken, little man, with rapid thought and with more rapid flight, fled from thy breast and left thee pale and wan. It did not know that love had not a place in this new world that others had devised. "How can he be my enemy, whose face I never saw?" said youth, when well advised by ears to stab and hurt and kill, and not to die till death had had its fill. It was actually written on the feast of the Curé Vaz, who had precisely knowledge of people's thought. But normally one's thought is concealed until a word betrays it. One day we were listening to one or two who had been there, and testimonies were being given about the way that the front line was in shreds. We were shown there where the Battle of the Somme had been, different areas of the battlefield, and for instance we were told that over there was Hell Corner. It was so named by the soldiers because it was so atrocious. We know also that at one point angels were seen over the battlefield. Very strange. And had it not been for my grandfather's deficiency in one eye, probably I would not be here now. His brother Willie was taken, and he got a grenade right on the head in the trench. My grandfather was sent to make armaments in Wrexham, where my mother was born. But that eye was the transmission of life for us. And in the Second World War, after graduation, people had to go. That was my father's case. Fortunately, he got asthma very bad and had to come back. He was on the way to the campaign of Burma, where those who were caught had an awful, awful time. Life, therefore, was truncated. We need to be grateful. The front line was in shreds. Roedd y front line wedi malu'n llwyr, said one veteran. And as I heard this, I couldn't but think what one moment is when actually we're right next to what is the last. Had we been born beneath another star and seen what these eyes saw, heard what these ears in their remembering still hear from afar, for that some sounds can travel many years, would we now be in this our fullest age, and holding in our hand the choice to be begotten or forgotten on the page, to be turned o'er by unborn progeny. We have lived ours, for our hours were not blown in one short hour of reckoning. Yet we know not well the meaning of an hour, well known to be the moment where all moments go in their momentous journey. Far beyond the pain that waved its little wand.